enthusiasts. My name is Wesley Cable, and I want to welcome you to episode number 5 of Obsessed with Wine podcast. I've created this podcast to explore fine wines from all over the world through conversations with those who share my love of wine and winemaking. We also taste and talk about incredible wines from all over the world. So grab a glass of your favorite wine and join me for episode number 5. The Columbia Valley AVA is the largest wine region in the state of Washington. Over 50,000 acres are planted to vineyards. The Columbia Valley AVA includes 99% of the total vineyard area planted in the state of Washington. Grapes in Washington are typically grown on the east side of the state, where they take advantage of well-draining, loam soils and lots of sunshine. Washington-grown wine grapes include Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Chardonnay, Riesling, Syrah, Pinot Grigio, and Sauvignon Blanc. Wine Spectator has been awarding wines in Washington consistently high scores lately, so I wanted to experience them for myself. Tonight's guest is Kristin Scheelar, Associate Winemaker at Columbia Winery in Woodinville, Washington. I really enjoyed my conversation with Kristin because, like me, she found her passion for wine later in life. I found Kristin's story inspirational, and I think it should be motivating to anyone who thinks it's too late for them to follow their passions. In this interview, Kristin tells me about a bottle of Merlot that started her on her wine journey, what makes Washington wines different than other parts of the country, and the advantages that come from working for a winery owned by EJ Gallo, the biggest wine company in the world. Tonight's guest is Kristin Scheelar. She is the associate winemaker at Columbia Winery in Woodinville, Washington. Kristin, I really appreciate you joining me tonight. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. And just a quick note for you. Columbia Winery, the production facility, is in Sunnyside, Washington. So we have a mountain range between Woodinville, where the tasting room is, and then where the production facility is in Sunnyside, Washington.
Oh, that's good to know. So how far away is Sunnyside from Woodinville?
A 3-hour drive.
Oh, wow. So it's quite a ways.
It really is. It's almost like 2 states Washington is. You know, the western side of the state, very wet. It's coastal and cool. The mountains then block the clouds from coming over to the eastern part of the state, where we're quite dry and sunny and warm and great for growing grapes.
Well, I noticed when I was looking into the AVA and Washington wine, there was a lot of talk about how a lot of the grapes are grown on the east of the state and not on
Correct.
the west. So why is that?
Again, because the West is just too cold, and they've tried over there, and they'll try things like white varietals like Zigarebe or Gruner Veltliner, and that's the only thing that'll ripen really. It just doesn't get warm enough.
Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about you first. So Kristin, my first question to you is, where did your passion from wine come from?
Sure. So just so you know, this is a second career for me. My first career, my most important career was being a mother. And before that, I was in pharmaceuticals. My degree was in exercise physiology. So obviously I went into pharmaceuticals. And then, my husband and I, we've always been wine lovers. My very first aha wine, and everybody has one, was Markham Merlot. I went out to dinner with a friend and her family, and her dad ordered this beautiful California Merlot. I don't know if Markham Winery is still in existence, but the Merlot was just gorgeous. And I thought, oh, that's what wine is supposed to taste like. It shouldn't really come out of a jug. So that was the aha wine for me, was Markham Merlot, and it really started me on the journey. It made me think this is something fine and something really artistic. I got that sense of the land and the terroir, the soil, the grapes, the whole thing kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. And from there, I started drinking wine. My husband and I started collecting. And then after you do all that, you say to yourself, somebody makes this. That light bulb comes on one day, and I said, I want to explore that, and went out looking for a way to do that.
So at some point you decided, all right, I want to try this as a career, or I want to get involved in this. And so you went to this Seattle Community College where had this wine production certificate program.
Right.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes,
so tell me about that. What's that all about?
Sure. It's funny. It's the Northwest Wine Academy, but it's really the Wine and Welding Academy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, very funny to have those two things together. I decided I would start to do sommelier work. And so I went to get some education in that. And I thought, okay, I'll get some education in wine, true formal education. And when I got over there, I started taking classes out at South, and there was a small experimental winery there, and they were teaching wine production there. And I looked in the door, kind of on a break from one of my other classes, and here's this tank, and there's a teacher and a student, obviously. So one is holding a beaker, there's golden liquid in it, it's foamy, and they're drinking it. And, I was mesmerized, truly. I thought, what are they doing? That looks like magic in there. And at that time, there was a big waiting list. You had to be on the waiting list. So luckily, I actually signed up that night. I said, God, I got to do that. That looks like a lot of fun. And I am not a girl who is mechanically inclined. My dad never taught me how to use tools or do anything like that. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, hopefully they'll teach me. And somebody dropped out, and I actually got in the next semester or the next quarter and just started in classes, and it was wonderful. It was amazing. How do you make wine? I had no idea. And they taught us from the ground up.
So was this after your kids were older, or were your kids still younger at the time when you did this?
My kids were still younger, but as your kids are growing up, and if you have children, you'll understand this, or anybody listening will understand, you sort of start to see the end of that road. It's like, oh, this is a shorter term project than I thought it might be. And, what shall I do after this? And so I started with the education before the kids were all grown up, because I wanted to be able to jump right into the career. I have the tools, at least, to jump right into the career when the children were grown up.
How long is that program?
It's just 2 years. Okay. It took me a little bit longer because I couldn't take all the classes sequentially. And there were things that I needed to learn, in addition. Not only was it the winemaking education, but again, that learning how to use equipment, learning how to drive a forklift, learning how to pump together. Yeah.
I've done 3 harvests, and I look at the pump still, and I think, okay, how do I do that? How does that work? I'm not mechanically inclined, so I just learn on the job. And so, it still takes me time when I'm looking at it to figure out what's going on. So you finished your education there, and was it like, okay, I'm done now. Now I'm going to find a job in a winery? Is that kind of how you did it?
Well, there were probably about 20 people in the class, and one of them was already a winemaker who had a winery. And he came to me, and I worked very hard. Like, in addition to going to the classes, they had practicals where you would put together pumps and so forth. But there were a lot of men. I was one of the few women in the class, and they are all very familiar with the equipment. And I wasn't in any way intimidated, but it wasn't easy to get in there, let's say. So I would go before class or after class and ask the professor to work with me and just say, can I have a little one-on-one time so I can learn to do this? And one of my classmates, the person that owned the winery, he saw how hard I was working and my desire to really understand things and be able to actually do it. And he came up and asked me if I had an internship yet. And I said, no, I don't. And he said, do you want one? I said, absolutely. So I started there. And that was in Woodinville, and it was a small boutique winery, but also this person did custom crush. So I started doing small boutique custom crush work, and that's where I got my start. And it was a lot of squeegeeing the floors, learning how to inoculate things and doing rudimentary lab work, just PhD, things like that. And it was a really great experience. And then, of course, learning how to drive that forklift.
Right. That's hard too. It's hard to learn and to get good at. It's one of those things you really have to do quite a bit just to really feel comfortable and get good at, especially if you're not used to it. So, all right. So where did you work then? What's the name of the place that you started?
Patterson Cellars.
Okay. And so was it everything you thought it was going to be coming from the school? Like, was it, you knew exactly what you were getting into and you knew what it was going to be about and all that?
I had no idea what I was getting into. None whatsoever. But I just knew that every time I did something, I wanted to do more. So once I started at the winery, I learned things like I have to wear a respirator in order to add this kind of, chemical. There are 3 white chemicals here. I need to know what each one of them does. You don't add this one to wine because this one is really for sanitation. These are the kinds of things that that's the basics, right? And you don't just toss things in. You have to learn how to make additions to wine and all of the checks along the way, the checks and balances. So there is a lot of rudimentary skill that you need to learn when you start in a winery. I joke about the squeegeeing the floor, but it's real.
Yeah.
The basics are sanitation, and sanitation is everything is built on sanitation. And if you don't want to do sanitation, then you don't want to make wine.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. You're right. That most of the work that especially the interns are doing is keeping the place clean and doing sanitation. So, all right. So you finished I'm assuming it was during harvest, your internship, or did you get to work the whole year?
The internship, it wasn't just a year long. I actually stayed for 2.5 years. The first year I was the intern and learned everything. Then the next year I was the leader for the interns. I had interns then, which was very fun because once you begin to talk about your knowledge, it grows further.
Teach other people what you know, right. And that really helps. So then what happened? So you finished this internship after a couple of years, and what, was it just time to do something else, or you wanted a new challenge, or where did you go from there?
Well, John Patterson, he looked at me and he said, you need to go and be a winemaker yourself. And he knew somebody, so he helped me get a job right up the street at a place called Robert Ramsey Cellars. There are a lot of winemakers in Woodinville who have other careers. They are usually in tech, but they own a winery and they hire somebody else to make the wine. So Bob knew that I had worked for John Patterson, and Bob Harris hired me as his winemaker. So I did about 3,500 cases. It's a tiny bit, 50 tons, maybe 50 to 100 tons. And I did that 100% on my own.
Wow. So what was that experience like?
Oh my God, it was so much work doing that on your own because, again, you're doing the lab work. I did hire a couple of interns and they were amazing. They could start up, and everything was done in bins, very small ferments. These were punch downs, a little bit of pump over, but they could start up 12 ferments in, an hour and a half. They were amazing. So I had a little bit of help during harvest. It was the best learning experience I had. When you have to do something yourself, and I'm a small woman, you can't see me standing up, but I'm like 5 feet. And so I learned a lot about physics and lever.
Sure.
Because I didn't have the physical strength just to lift things. So I had to figure out how to make things work, tilt a tank so that I could get the rest of the juice out, get it ready for pressing, things like that, how to prep barrels, all of those things. And we took it right from field to bottle. So I would go out to the vineyards, check for ripeness, bring the samples back, and then the pick would be called and bring the fruit in, and it just all the way to barrel, right from there all the way to barrel, and then from barrel to bottle. And bottling, really, it's all about process. You just have to make sure you have all the parts and pieces together.
It sounds like a lot of responsibility going from interning for a couple of years and then all of a sudden, boom, you're in charge, right? You're the one making all the decisions, right? That had to be hard.
No, it wasn't hard for me. I was ready for it. It's an interesting wine. I feel that with every time I've gone to do something in wine, I feel like the doors have swung wide for me. I haven't had to really struggle to get jobs. When I got a job, I just kept on moving forward and doing things. In fact, when I was doing that work as the winemaker at Robert Ramsey, I happened to be in an area where there were a lot of smaller wineries around. So I would actually go do punch downs for people, add chems, do things. So I was working there, but then working at another winery also. And coming from Custom Crush is a 3-ring circuit. And you really have all the balls in the air. You're juggling all the time. So coming from Custom Crush and then coming to a winery where I was just making wine for one brand, it was really a joy because I could really focus on what I was doing. So for me at Robert Ramsey Cellars, I was focusing only on that wine. I could think about the barrels and what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. Do I want to stir these barrels? Do I want to leave it on the lees? We worked a lot with puncheons also, the 500-liter punches, and that was great education. Those are amazing to work with. Difficult to move, but boy, they make some beautiful wine.
So in a situation like that where you're in charge, do you have a lot of say in how you want to do things as far as, what barrels and how you want to do that and all that? Do you get that kind of say in that?
So usually the barrels were provided for me. And then we would go over, okay, this wine is going in this barrel. This wine is, how much new, how much neutral, all of that. So it was collaborative.
So you're at Robert Ramsey Cellars and you're making wine, and then what? So then obviously you moved on somewhere else. So what made you decide to leave and go do something else?
I did it for 4 years at Robert Ramsey Cellars. I was getting some great scores. I got to work with single varietal Mourvedre, Cinsault. We were a Rhone house, and then Grenache and Syrah. And I just had so much fun doing it. But there comes a ceiling of learning wherever you are. And after 4 years, I felt I had reached that ceiling, and I had a good friend who was ready for a position like I had taken on. So I quit my job and said, but I have somebody here for you, and slotted her into my position. And I had wanted to move east of the mountains because every time I had driven over to go see the grapes, I thought, you need to be here. You need to be with the grapes in order to really develop as a winemaker. If you're coming over once or twice a year, that's just not enough. And I told my husband this. He was able to travel because he works from home. So wherever he is his office. And he said, well, get a job. If you want to move east of the mountains, get a job. And the other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to do larger winemaking. I had done small boutique, smaller boutique, custom crush. And so I got a job at Goose Ridge. And Goose Ridge Winery, gosh, it's just enormous. 2,200 acres of estate fruit, which is about 16,000 tons.
Okay.
It's a lot of wine. And then additionally, we brought in grapes. Well, we did some winemaking for a few other customers as well. So that's a long harvest. And it was just fascinating. The grapes don't come in bins. They come in 8-ton loads in trucks, in three gondolas on a truck. And it's just over and over and over for, 3 or 4 months. But we made some amazing wine. We had a big production facility, and then we had a smaller boutique wine area. So we had specific growing areas where we had some great clones, Ontav clones. These are French clones where we had small blocks that we would make into some of the tasting room wines. So we made tasting room wines, and then we made just larger core brands that are out in the grocery stores and so forth. And it was just amazing.
What was that like? You're going from a smaller place, right? Like you said, boutique wines, right? And then all of a sudden you're in this place where it's just a huge place where you're making a ton of wine. So what is that like? What is the difference day to day?
So at boutique winemaking, I was making wine in bins, right? Or small stainless 1-ton fermenters. I remember opening the door the first day I got to Goose Ridge. And they have an office area. You open the door to the tank farm. The tank farm's very large. And the smallest tank that they had there was like 13,000 gallons. So largish, And you open the door and it's like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. It's like, oh my goodness.
Right. Wow.
And I remember thinking, I have no idea what they want me to do here.
What did you do? What was your job? Were you a winemaker there too?
Yeah, assistant winemaker there. And I had never seen trucks come in with the 8-ton gondolas. I had never seen that. And I learned, on the fly, really, it's just amazing how production is done. And production in larger facilities like that is all about process. You have to love process in order to make wine like that. And I do. I love process. If you follow the steps, it gets done right. So it was a matter of following the steps. And, things go wrong. Things go wrong. Yeah. Tank doors open and wine spills. And I remember thinking, just as people were evacuating, some of the wine out of the hose after they'd done, let's say, a racking from a tank, I thought, what's going down the drain is the entire production of some of these small winemakers that I used to work for.
It's a different mindset for sure when you were working in a big place like that. Yeah.
Much different mindset. But the good part about working in a large place like that is the breadth of knowledge that you gain. For instance, just with yeast, I might have worked with little 500-gram bags over in Woodinville. Here, I was working with 10-kilogram boxes of many, many different kinds of yeast. So you get to figure out, what is this yeast like? Does yeast actually make a difference? So you're asking yourself these questions. You're using many different types of malolactic bacteria. And again, do they actually make a difference in the flavor? The length of fermentation, just so many different things. Heat, the heat on the tank. When you're using open top fermenters, you don't have any control over that. And one of the biggest things I learned is how important temperature control is in fermentation.
Interesting. Yeah. So how long did you do that for then, work at Goose Ridge?
I worked there for 3 years.
Now you're, 8 years into your career and you've done all kinds of things. I'm just kind of rough guess, 9 years into it. So then what? You decided I need to do something else? Is that kind of how it happened, or?
Well, so I missed the boutique part. I had been an assistant winemaker in the production facility, in the larger production. They put me in large winemaking. And I really wanted to do both. And I had one of the customers that I had at Goose, I read an ad in Wine Business, and it said they were hiring for an associate winemaker position, which is a step up. And that was the other thing, too. I think there was, when your Goose Ridge is one company, it's a bit smaller. There's just family owned. And there was no step up for me at Goose. And I'm kind of that kind of gal who's always pushing forward. I'm very curious, want to continue learning all the time. And I wanted to do both things. I wanted to do boutique and large. So I went and applied at Columbia Winery. And I did not know at the time was that they are a company of a part of EJ Gallo. And EJ Gallo is the largest winemaking company in the world. So it just doesn't get any bigger. And I couldn't turn it down. I have, I do all of the boutique wines there. All the tasting room wines are my work, myself, and I have a team of 2 other people. And then we do large winemaking as well. We're really a medium-sized winery, but we have capacity to do about 1.5 million gallons a year.
When you think about a big company like Gallo, most people think that it must be a huge difference just in the resources that are available to you versus some of these other places. Is that a noticeable difference?
Hugely noticeable. I mean, when I say that they encourage us to innovate, they also provide for us the resources that we need to innovate. I want to make Viognier in a concrete egg, and you plan that, and they will help you do that. So the resources are available to us, and we have to justify what we're doing. This is what I'm thinking. This is the direction I'd like to go. They may say, oh, well, we've already tried that and it wasn't great, or yes, it was great. And that's, take it even further. Let's see what you can do. Because Washington State is different than California fruit. So we're still in the infancy here in Washington. So therefore, I think there's a lot to learn yet. Even the Gallo family has a lot to learn about Washington wine.
So tell me about just Washington wine. And like you said earlier, you and your husband, you guys drink wine probably from all over the place. So what's different about Washington versus some of the other places?
Well, obviously, geographically, we're very much further north. And so we have very long days in the summertime. We're probably, light for a very long time. We're light probably 4 hours longer than California, let's say. So you have a lot of warmth, a lot of heat units, a lot of light, and the grapes ripen beautifully. We also have diurnal shifts that are very dramatic. We can go from, 40 at night to 90 during the day. So the grapes have, time to cool and breathe and get ready for the next day. It's great. The soils here are mostly loam. We have water loam, and the loam is great for drainage. It's gravelly, it's a lot of drainage. We also have a lot of calcium in the soil. So water retention is really good here. So I think the conditions are really just beautiful for growing great grapes. And everything started here in the Yakima Valley. And the Yakima Valley is gorgeous for growing grapes. When you see the valley, it truly is a valley. Mountains are rising up on either side. And we're growing grapes up on top of the mountains as well. We're up above on the Horseheaven Hills, looking over the Columbia River. Some of the vineyards are stunning. You go up, and the first time I remember driving up to the top of the Horseheaven Hills and looking out, it took my breath away because there was nothing there. It's wheat fields.
I have to say the Columbia Winery website is excellent. And because it has a lot of great pictures of the AVAs you draw from to make your wines. Obviously, I'm just looking at it on a computer screen, and it's amazing. I can only imagine how amazing it is being in person and being able to see what that looks like. It's pretty awesome.
It is pretty awesome. It's beautiful. And being able just to get out into those vineyards and watch them the whole season through, obviously to see bud break and then bloom, and to watch the grapes come on the vine. And things do happen. We have things like shatter, and shatter is where you get wind or rain or hail right at bloom time, and takes all of the blooms off of the grapes. And then, of course, you have fewer grapes. So these kinds of things have an effect on crop load and so forth. And then we're very windy. So vines are hardy. They have to withstand the wind.
So the winemaker's name is Sean Hales, and he's a Canadian guy. He's worked in a whole bunch of different areas, including Australia. So what's he like to work for? What is his style? What does he bring to the winery?
Sean is one of the best bosses I've ever had. He is very hands-off. He's not a micromanager in any way. He, again, really upholds the philosophy of Gallo. It's always a lot of collaboration, and he makes it really fun. It can be stressful during harvest, and he's not like an overseer. He's not giving directions. He's saying, well, what would you do here? And asking if, have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? So again, he's trying to collaborate and help you to develop more leadership skills and so forth. I lead a team of, during harvest, we're probably about 15. So I'm making sure that everything that goes in tank turns into wine and turns into good. And then calling the pick, he's very interested in developing his people. And so now people love to call the pick. That's a big deal for people. That is when they feel like they've really made it. And as much as I like to do it, when you're calling the pick for a 400-ton lot, it better be right.
Right. Wow. So what is his philosophy? If you had to say his winemaking philosophy is what? How would you describe that for Sean?
Bold. He likes to make bold. He likes to get everything he can out of the wine. He will do all kinds of things. Heat is very important in the fermentation, as I said. So he's trying to get every bit out of the skins. He's also very detail oriented. It comes from being out in the vineyard as much as he is during harvest. When he's tasting the grapes, this is a thing that he'll say to me. He'll say, "Hey, did you go out to Red Mountain? Did you go over to Clipson? What'd you think?" And I'll say, "Well, I don't think it's quite ripe yet." And he'll look at me and say, "Yeah, I think it's salad. It's salad. It's not ready." Because of the green.
Too green.
Yeah, too sweet green salad. We're not going to pick that yet. So again, collaborative. He's asking you first and then, giving his opinion. So, but he does love to make big, bold wines. And sometimes though, he's making decisions like, well, something happened to the grapes. Let's say they got rot. Okay. And he's asking the crews to, pick around the rot. And then when the grapes get into the fermenter, you're doing things to mitigate that. Maybe you're pressing off early so that you don't get any of that flavor in the wine. So he's very detail oriented in that way. He's mitigates problems way, way up front so that they don't become problems in the bottle.
So I was looking at all the AVAs that you guys source your grapes from, and just want to talk about that for a minute. So the Columbia Valley it's a pretty huge area, and there's a lot of, I guess, are they sub-AVAs in the Columbia Valley, little smaller ones? Is that kind of how it is? But Columbia Valley is this huge, I guess 90% of wine grapes grown in Washington are grown in this Columbia Valley. Is that right?
It is right. Yes, it's almost the entire state.
Wow. And so then it looks like you, in Washington specifically, so you guys grow Cabernet.
Absolutely.
Chardonnay.
Yes.
Merlot. Riesling, Syrah, and I saw a little Chenin Blanc and etc. So am I missing any other varieties that grow really well in Washington?
Grenache, Sangiovese, let's see, Grenache Blanc. There are a few people doing that. Barbera. Walla Walla does a lot of Cabernet. I'm trying to think what else they do. But yeah, so we grow a large variety. I think one of the few things that we don't grow very well is Pinot Noir. We don't do that.
Okay.
Yep.
So when you think about California wine, you think about Cabernet is king. Like most people say, hey, Cabernet is king in California. So what's king in Washington? Is it also Cabernet? Is Cabernet king in Washington also?
We grow some great Cabernet. I wouldn't argue that with anybody. But I would say that the best thing that we do is Syrah. Our Rhone variety, Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, beautiful. But Syrah in particular, it's really amazing from place to place. It really shows the terroir. It really gives a sense of place. And it's very pure, very focused wine. It's absolutely gorgeous. A Syrah from Walla Walla versus a Syrah from Red Mountain or Red Willow vineyards, all different. They express themselves completely differently.
So I see you guys source fruit from other AVAs.
We do.
Red Mountain, which you mentioned.
Yeah.
Horse Heaven Hills, which you talked about a little bit earlier. Yes. Ancient Lakes, Yakima Valley. You recommended tonight this Cabernet that we're having, the Red Mountain 2018 Cabernet. So tell me about this wine and why. I'm assuming it's from the Red Mountain AVA. And tell me about what wines from there are all about.
So Red Mountain is our smallest AVA. It's a tiny little AVA, and it's steep. It's hilly and steep, and the soil is, calcium and loam, and it's the amount of heat that it gets, but it's the right amount of heat. It's not an enormous amount of heat. And then, of course, the slope, how it's south facing and a little southeast and a little southwest. So everywhere on that slope is gorgeous for ripening up Cabernet. Quintessence Vineyard is where most of the wine that's in there, that's where we're getting the vineyard that we're getting this wine from. And it's just beautiful. We're halfway down the slope. The slope goes from about 300 to 1,000 feet. And we're probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 600. They were planting a new vineyard area. So we said, let's make, Columbia's this part. It's halfway up the hill. The way that the wind comes down the hill, the drainage of the air comes down. And so you don't have any sinks where you might have cold spots It's all beautiful. It's vertical shoot positioning. The vineyard managers are outstanding. Right around harvest time, what you're seeing shoots go up, and you're seeing fruit in the fruiting zone that just looks like little Christmas ornaments hung, evenly. And they're doing about 2 clusters per shoot, depending on what you want. So maybe 5 tons per acre. It's just absolutely gorgeous fruit. It just doesn't get any better, I think, in this state. Now, people will argue with me. They'll talk about
I'm sure.
in Horse Heaven Hills. They would talk about Walla Walla. Walla Walla is gorgeous, but this particular Quintessence Vineyard on Red Mountain, it's outstanding fruit.
So do you get up there during harvest time? Do you get to go up on the mountain? I mean, it seems like it'd be one of those challenging areas to farm just because it's on such a slope, right? A challenge?
The slope is fairly gentle, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll say it's not really a mountain. I mean, if you're looking at Mount Rainier, Mount Adams, Red Mountain's more like Red Hill.
Okay.
But, they call it Red Mountain, so we'll go with that. Okay. In comparison, it's not a mountain, it's a hill, but it's just a really nice area. Again, as I say, it's the heat that is consistently there. And it ripens a bit earlier than most other things, basically because of the low crop level that they do there and the way that the slope is faced, that south-facing slope and the air drainage. It all really helps ripening. So we're usually picking this Cabernet probably early October, where we might pick other Cabernets mid-late October.
So you selected this Cabernet for tonight to represent Columbia Winery. So tell me about the particular wine itself. Why'd you pick this one?
Okay. So as I say, I make the tasting room wines. So this is my work. The 2019 vintage in particular was just about a perfect vintage. There were no problems from bud break all the way to harvest. There were no problems. There were no weather events. Any weather events was just a tiny little drizzle, and it just wet the grapes just enough to help them ripen just a little bit more. And then when they came into the winery, oh my goodness, it's like the wine made itself. And it was just one of those vintages that was quite special. I won't say easy. I don't think winemaking is an easy proposition, but it certainly was effortless, much more effortless than any other vintage that we've had. And again, without problems. And the wine went into the oak beautifully, and it was so sturdy. The tannins and the fruit were beautifully balanced. And it was so sturdy, it just sucked up the new oak. It just said, oh, thank you. I'll take those tannins. That's nice. So all of it came together in a way that is rare.
So this particular wine here, this is a 2018 Red Mountain Cabernet. What's the aging on this? How many months in oak is this aged, and what kind of oak do you guys use for this particular wine?
So for this particular wine, we're about 19 months, and we do about 60% new oak. Okay. Most of it French, about probably 82%, 80-ish% French oak. And that is one of the joys, is we always make more wine than we need. So it's kind of Christmas Day when you are putting this wine together. You lay all your barrels out and you have your barrel thief in your glass, and you're choosing the 20 or 30 barrels that you need to make this Red Mountain Cabernet. And then you do it on the bench. You make your choices and you put it together on the bench, and you decide if that is absolutely the best wine that you can make. And that is probably, when you're asking me about Sean Hales, his style is, I want to make the best wine possible with the fruit that we have. And so that is what we do. We begin putting together, this is the art part of it. This is, the great thing about wine is you're using both sides of your brain. Your science is over, the art is over here, and you're smelling and tasting. And you asked me about this wine. I hear the aromatics kind of jump out of the glass. Now I've had mine open for a little bit because I wanted the aromatics to go so beautifully. Yeah. I can smell the minerality in it. There's an underlying structure of minerality. The fruit is really dark. I don't think that it expresses itself so much as like blackberry or blueberry. It's sort of, would be as if you did a reduction of many dark fruits like that. It's leathery. It has a little leathery undertone. But what I love is that the frame for the fruit rather than, the main course. And the balance here is absolutely wonderful. And when you put it in your mouth, the fruit is right up front. There's a lot of spice from the barrel. It is smooth. I get a silkiness on the palate. The weight is very, very nice. I think the alcohol here is just right around 15, maybe just a hair over. But I think a large Cabernet like this, it needs to be in that range. Lower, and you're not getting everything you can out of the wine. So really comes together beautifully. It's round. It is a bit masculine, I think.
Okay.
And by that, I mean, it's not aggressive, but it's definitely saying, hello there, look at me. So I always think of Cabernet Sauvignon as a man wearing a tuxedo. It's just that formal.
Well, you guys also make white wines. So what are some whites that you guys make that you're especially excited or proud of that you guys make there?
So we do Sauv Blanc, and I think Sauv Blanc is so pretty. And stylistically, it can be done in so many different ways. It can be very grassy, like Australian style. It can be tropical. So, you pick up some kiwi or pineapple in it. So our Stratus blend it's Viognier, and it is Sauv Blanc and a little tiny bit of Muscat in there just for the aromatics. The Muscat brings up the aromatics. It's kind of a tangerine aromatic. But together with those three things, it comes together in an interesting way. It's also a Rhone white blend. And as I say, we do Rhones very well here. We've actually taken to fermenting the Viognier and the Sauv Blanc in concrete eggs. The concrete eggs, they give this oiliness on the palate, which is not great on its own. You wouldn't want to bottle that by itself. But when you add it to some barrel fermented Sauv Blanc and some stainless steel fermented Sauv Blanc, it comes together to really round out the palate. You get a nice focused attention from the Sauv Blanc that's in stainless steel. That usually brings up the grassy aromatics that you get. And then you get this heavier palate weight. But it's a beautiful Rhone blend that I think is different than anybody else is doing and lovely. I think you'd like it.
Well, I'm going to have to get some of that because I definitely like things that are different and that are interesting. This Cabernet is excellent. This is the first time I've ever actually had a Washington Cabernet, and most of the Cabernet I've ever had has been from California. So yeah, this is excellent. It's such a great experience. I really appreciate you recommending this for me tonight. So let me ask you a question based on what you were talking about. So have you always had a good palate for detecting flavors and wines, etc., or is this something that you've developed since you started working in wine? Because I know for some people it's a real challenge to try to pick out all these flavors and nuances in these wines. So how did that all develop for you?
So I think the most challenging thing for people is uncovering. It's kind of like there's wine on top of everything. Let me explain that. So one of the classes that I took at the Northwest Wine Academy was all about aromatics and flavor. And what they did was they took red wine, just generic Cabernet, some box Cabernet, and they put things in it. They put like a little bit of smoke, and they put a little bit of green bean, and they put, so they amplified these flavors that might actually be in Cabernet. They would put chocolate, and then you had to swirl and smell. And what it did was it showed you what a very strong aromatic that should have been underneath, right? That's in every bottle, but it's a smaller component. They just amplified it so that you could then detect, oh, this is what chocolate might smell like in wine. Now green beans, of course, would be methoxypyrazine. So that's an aromatic that we don't love. That's, green beans, not great in red wine, but now you know what that smells like, right? So, and then the smoke would be a component from maybe the barrel. There was cinnamon and vanilla that they put into the wine, and those would be barrel notes, of course. So that's how I started understanding how it all comes together. People will often say, if you pour them a glass of red wine, they'll say, well, I know I like it, but I don't know anything about wine, and I really don't know what I'm smelling. And I always like to respond to that by saying, well, but you do. First thing you know is, do you like it or not?
Right.
That's the thing.
Most people could tell you that for sure, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
So you're confident in that. Thing number two is, do you like the aromas? Is there anything off-putting? Tell me about the length of the wine. Do you still taste it after you've swallowed it, for 5 or 10 seconds? You have some length there. Is it drying in the center of the palate? So you really are trying to help them learn how to define some of the characteristics. For me, I kept on, you smell everything. A smell like wet pavement, after it's rained. Sometimes you'll smell that in the wine, like let's say from Grave, French Bordeaux. You'll smell that, and it's very pronounced. But you have to smell it, and then you have to say it out loud. And when you smell it and you say it, now you're imprinting it into your mind. Then when you taste it in wine, you say, oh, I smell or I taste wet stone. And yes, you probably do taste whetstone. There's a lot of minerality in some of the French Bordeaux. So it's smelling it and saying it and then relating it back to the wine. But that's a little bit of intense study and intense thinking about it. Most people just want to open the bottle and have a nice glass of wine. So coming back to, do you like it or don't you?
I think the hard thing for me is when I taste something, I know the taste, but I can't identify what it is. And so that's the hardest part for me. So when I'm smelling a fermentation and I can say, oh, I smell this, this, and this, but I can't put a name on what it is. Go
to the grocery store and go to your fruit area, and get fruit. Get fruit that's, star fruit. Who knows what that smells like? It smells like Sauv Blanc. No, it's kind of tropical, so that's, there's a descriptor that you can say, oh, okay, yes. If somebody says, oh, it's star fruit, now you know what that smells like. Persimmon, things like that. All these kind of tropical things that maybe you don't have much experience with. People don't. They know what strawberries and raspberries taste like, but they don't necessarily know, some of these other things.
Right. You might say star fruit, and I'd be like, "What is that? I don't remember. I don't know what it tastes like." So no, that's a good idea actually for people who want to kind of develop their palate. It takes work. It's not going to just happen. You're going to have to expose yourself to certain smells and tastes in order to be able to develop that palate. So that's excellent. So let's talk a little bit about the winery. So you guys are open, it looks like, from Wednesday to Sunday, so not every day at the winery, right?
Room. Exactly.
At the tasting room, okay? And you guys offer a bunch of different wine tastings there. I'm assuming you guys charge to taste there at the winery or not?
Yes.
Okay, so what does it cost to go to Columbia Winery and taste wine? Do you have any idea?
I'm going to say that they have a menu with different tastings. Like you might do a library tasting where you're tasting aged wines, and that would be $25 or $30. I know that the tastings that you do, if you want to just come up to the bar and taste the different wines, I don't think that costs any. I know that if you pay for a tasting, I believe that goes to the purchase of a wine. So it's not very expensive. Yeah, it's not so expensive. Right. Worth it.
It's very reasonable, it sounds like. Very reasonably priced.
Yeah, it is.
So I was looking at the website in preparation for tonight's conversation, and it says that, hey, check out our sister wineries. So it said Talbot Vineyards in Monterey and Edna Valley Vineyards in San Luis Obispo. So do you know anything about those wineries?
I do. Talbot in particular, one of my favorite winemakers is the winemaker there, Dave Coventry. So there are many, many wineries in Gallo. I don't think that they actually say a number.
Right.
But
they own everything.
They do. They own a lot of things. So when I go down there for winemaker meetings, obviously we go to the hometown. So the hometown is Modesto or Napa.
Yeah.
Actually, we go to Napa quite a lot. And every time I go there, I go a couple days early and I'll visit a winery. So I've visited Sonoma and Jay Vineyards, and we went to Talbot. Talbot is amazing. They have an estate vineyard there, Sleepy Hollow Vineyard, and some that are like Latitude, this or that, but they make Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. They're like nobody's business. Wow. They make a lot of in the large puncheon size, the 600 or 500 liter size. And so I am a huge fan of French Chardonnay. And Dave hits it in that style, the Burgundian style. Dave really hits it. It's the way I describe it is like a golden flavor. And we don't get that much in the States. For instance, Rombauer Chardonnay down in around the Silverado Trail there, beautiful Chardonnay. Yeah. But that is to me quintessential California big Chardonnay. I love it.
California style, yeah.
Yes, love it. And Rombauer, I think, is, like I said, I think it's the queen, the top. Plus, I love their story. But the Burgundian Chardonnays, they have this golden flavor to them, and it's kind of like a crown or a sprinkling. It's really hard to describe. But when you taste it, you go, there it is. It's so special, and you really only get it, in Burgundy. But when you taste it in the United States, you know that somebody is taking great care. Plus, you can't do that everywhere. Like we really aren't getting that in Washington State. The Chardonnays here are good, not great. They need more age on the vine. But down in California at Talbot, they have great age on the vines. Dave knows what he's doing with the Chardonnay there, and it's absolutely gorgeous. If you have a chance to grab a bottle, the Cali Heart Chardonnay, it's all under screw cap Stelvin enclosures, but it's beautiful. It's just gorgeous wine. I mean, start with the Cali Heart and then move up to some of the other expensive bottles. I think Cali Heart is $15.
Wow. Very reasonable.
Yeah. Very reasonable. Very reasonable. So that's a great one. That's a beautiful sister winery. Edna Valley, they do everything. They do Chardonnay and Cabernet. And let's see, I don't know if they don't do any Rhones. Maybe maybe no Rhones, but the Chardonnay and Cabernet there. Cabernet is wonderful. It's just amazing. And then it's Russian River Chardonnay that they're doing there. So just fine fruit, the age of the fruit. The thing about California, to me, they're kind of, France is the mothership. California is the teenagers and we're the babies.
Okay.
Washington were the babies. So there's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of innovation going on there. So you can really find some really interesting wines, but they've been doing Chardonnay and Cabernet for so long. They really have it dialed in. I mean, it's lovely. I think what they're doing at Edna is really, really nice. And they've really had some issues to deal with all the fires in the last couple of years.
Right.
It's been tough on them.
Yeah, it has. Well, Kristin, I really appreciate your time, and it's been awesome getting an education on Washington wine because, like I said, I haven't had a lot of experience with Washington, and so this Cabernet you recommended has been awesome, so I really appreciate that. The last question I ask everybody before the end of the interview is, besides Columbia Winery wine, what else are you drinking right that you enjoy?
Bloody Marys.
Okay.
You're talking about wine, right?
What about wines? Yeah.
Let's see. So I think I mentioned Talbot. That's just really delicious. And Rombauer. Beautiful, beautiful wines. From Washington State, though, one of the wines that I really love is Fidelitas. Fidelitas is Charlie Hoppus. Charlie Hoppus is an amazing winemaker, and he has built, he's been in Washington wine for as long as Washington wine has been around. He's been named Winemaker of the Year many times, and he's just a genuinely fantastic guy. And I will say in closing that one of my own personal philosophies in wine is you have to work hard and be nice. And nice people make nice wine.
So when I get up to Washington, I would love to come by and check out what you guys got going on over there at Columbia Winery and try the wines. So thank you very much, Kristin, for your time. You've been awesome, and we learned a ton about Washington wine, and thank you for recommending this Cabernet, and I look forward to other Washington wines that I can try, especially the ones that you recommended. So thank you so much. Have a great evening, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, Kristin, for sharing your story and teaching us about wines crafted in the great state of Washington. I also want to thank you for bringing my attention to this 2018 Red Mountain Cabernet. Any Cabernet lover should try this wine. It's terrific. I will leave a link to Columbia Winery's website in the show notes so you can explore their wines for yourself. I want to thank you for being part of episode number 5 of Obsessed with Wine podcast. Whether you're new to the podcast or have listened before, I would appreciate it if you would rate and subscribe to the show on my website at www.obsessedwithwine.net. I also encourage you to interact with the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Just look for Obsessed with Wine. Thank you, and I'll see you next week. Cheers!